Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking into some really profound ideas. We've got these sources you shared transcripts from Swami Viditatmananda's commentary on parts of the Kenopanishad.
That's right.
And our goal today, well, it's to dive into these teachings, sort of pull out the key insights, and help you, our listener, get a handle on some core concepts from this specific commentary, of course.
Yeah, these transcripts offer a fascinating window, really, into a traditional approach to one of the major Upanishads.
Hmm.
The Kenopanishad, at least in the sections discussed here, it just gets right to the core questions, doesn't it?
Like what?
Like, what's the power behind the mind? What makes our senses work? Seeing, hearing, even thinking. What's the real source of all that activity? And then it dives into the nature of that ultimate reality, Brahman, Atman, whatever term you use, and the path to understanding it.
Right. So using these transcripts as our map, let's try and unpack the key points Swami Vivekananda is making. We'll draw straight from this material. Let's get started.
Okay, so where do you even begin with something this big?
Mm.
The commentary seems to start somewhere quite human. The search for happiness. We all do it, right?
Mm.
Looking for it. Usually outside ourselves, in things, people, experiences.
Exactly. And that's the contrast the commentary sets up right away.
Yeah.
It draws a sharp line between seeking happiness in external things, they're called anatma vishaya, objects that are not the self, and turning that search inward, an inquiry into the self, the Atman.
Okay.
This deep seeking, this jnana into the self, it's presented as fundamentally different from just chasing pleasure or wanting certain results from our actions in the world.
So the kind of search dictates the path.
Pretty much, yes. The teaching outlines different paths based on what you're ultimately aiming for. You've got the path of action, the karma kanda, which focuses on actions for results, often temporary ones, like, say, reaching some heavenly realm, svarga.
But then there's the path of knowledge, Jnanakanda, which is all about knowing the eternal self, Brahman.
So action has a role, but it's different.
Yes, the view here is that action, karma, can be crucial preparation. It helps purify the mind, the antakarana, making it ready for that deeper insight. Things like acting without attachment to the outcome, what's often called nishkama karma,
Right.
and certain meditations or contemplative practices, upasana, these are ways to prepare that inner space, for self-knowledge, brahmajnana, to dawn.
But just doing rituals for, say, getting into heaven, that's not the same thing as seeking this inner knowing.
No, not at all, according to this commentary. It actually suggests that actions done only for those kinds of temporary external results might even, well, pull you in the opposite direction from understanding the eternal, unchanging self. The purpose, the prakarana of your inquiry, really shapes the whole path. One path prepares the ground for knowledge, the other seeks gains within the realm of change.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's go deeper then. The Upanishad itself, and the commentary highlights this, asks that huge question. What's the power source? What allows the mind to think, the eyes to see? What's directing them?
Yeah, and this is where things get really interesting. The commentary explains that our tools, the mind, the senses, they're fundamentally inert. Akutan is a word used. They don't have their own consciousness or power to direct themselves.
Inert, so they don't work on their own.
Exactly. Their activity, their functioning, their priority, it only happens because they're being empowered, directed by something that is conscious, Chaitan. The activity isn't inherent in the tools themselves.
So there's this background consciousness running the show.
Precisely. And that leads straight to the central challenge, really, of the Kenopanishad as this commentary presents it. How can this consciousness, this director, this self or Brahman, which is consciousness, how can it be known? Because our usual ways of knowing, right? Perception, logic, inference, they work by grabbing hold of objects, things with features, boundaries. But this self, it's the light itself. It's the consciousness that makes all knowing possible. It's not something the senses or mind can shine a light on. It is the light.
Wow, it's like trying to see your own eyeball directly.
That's one way to put it. The knower, the pramata, the subject.
Yeah.
It can't really become an object for itself or its instruments. The sources stress that the self isn't available. Upalabdhi isn't the word, but the idea is it's not available like a chair or a thought is available to be known. It's the ever-present background, the subject, beyond the reach of our usual knowledge tools, our pramanas.
Okay, so if we can't grasp it like an object, what is it like? What's the nature of this reality, according to Swami Viditatmananda's commentary?
Well, the way it's described is fundamentally different. It's self-luminous swayam prakasha, meaning it doesn't need anything else to reveal it. It shines by its own nature.
Self-luminous, like the lamp analogy you mentioned.
Exactly, that's a classic one. Just like a lamp lights itself up, and by doing so, it lights up the room. Consciousness illuminates itself, and its very presence makes the mind, senses, and the whole world known. It's also described as eternal, nitya, and changeless nirvikara. It is consciousness, nityavijnana swarupa, the fundamental reality, satya.
And it doesn't need proof.
It's self-proven, Swayamsiddha. It's the bedrock of all experience, the foundation upon which proof itself rests. You can't really step outside of consciousness to prove consciousness.
Okay, this is deep. We have this internal self-shining consciousness as our core reality. If that's true, why don't we feel like that? Why do we feel so, well, limited, tied to this body, this mind, these ups and downs?
Right, and that brings us straight to the core problem identified in the commentary. Ignorance.
Yeah.
Actually, no. And it's not just, not knowing facts. It's a deeper, active misknowing of aparya, a wrong understanding.
A wrong understanding. How so?
It leads to what's called superimposition at hieropa. We mistakenly take the characteristics of the non-self found, the body, the mind, our thoughts, feelings, the world, all of which are temporary and changing, and we plaster them onto the eternal, changeless self.
Like seeing a rope in the dark and thinking it's a snake.
That's a very common analogy used, yes. That superimposition is what creates this powerful sense of being a limited individual, this manusyatvam. I am this person born on this date. I am the doer of actions, the experiencer of happiness and sadness. The commentary says this everyday reality we live in is essentially an adhairopatam, a superimposed reality for most people. It's a profound case of mistaken identity, fueled by this fundamental ignorance.
Okay. So if our usual ways of knowing can't grasp it, and this ignorance kind of hides it, how do we access or realize this self-luminous reality? What's the way?
This is where the path, and particularly insights that seem relevant to Section 2 discussions in these sources, really come into focus. The commentary points to a very unique mode of knowing. It's described as known through each modification of the intellect, pratibodha viditam.
Known through thoughts. Hold on, didn't you say the mind, the intellect, can't grasp it as an object?
Exactly, that's the crucial distinction. It's subtle. It doesn't mean the intellect, buddhi, knows the self as an object, like it knows a tree or a math problem.
Then how?
It's more like this eternal consciousness gets reflected in the intellect, specifically in the modifications or movements of the intellect, buddhivritti, but only when the intellect is sufficiently pure and subtle.
Reflected.
Yeah, think of those analogies again, like the sun's reflection in perfectly still, clear water.
Right.
Or like fire pervading a piece of iron until the iron seems to glow like fire itself. The consciousness isn't captured or changed by the intellect. Its presence is revealed in the refined activity of the intellect.
Ah, okay. So it's about creating the right conditions for that reflection, not about objectifying it.
Precisely. It's a knowing that's also a being. And this realization, this pratibodha viditam, this knowing through each thought wave, as it were, it's said to bring immense strength, virium, and immortality, amritatvam.
Immortality. And what about those verses that sometimes sound like, it is not known?
Right. The commentary addresses that apparent contradiction. Statements like, Naveda, he is not known, don't mean it's utterly unknowable or that we remain in total ignorance. They mean it's not known by the ordinary means, in the ordinary subject-object way. It's known uniquely, intimately, as one's own essential nature, collapsing that very subject-object division.
Okay. And how do we cultivate that purity, that subtlety of mind needed for this reflection? What are the means?
Well, the sources are quite clear on this. The primary instrument, the absolutely essential means, is scriptural testimony. The teachings of the Upanishads themselves, the Shruti, and importantly heard from a qualified teacher, someone in the tradition, the Panampara.
A teacher is necessary.
Yes. The commentary emphasizes the role of the Acharya Vyakya, the teacher's unfolding of the text. Scripture is presented as the unique and valid authority, the Vakya Pramanya, for this knowledge, simply because other means like perception or inference fall short. They can't reach that far.
So you can't just sit and think your way there.
Not according to this teaching. The guidance is crucial, and alongside that, you need a certain readiness, a receptivity often called faith, shraddha. But it's not blind faith. It's more like trust based on initial reasoning, a willingness to seriously entertain and explore what the teaching points towards, moving beyond just intellectual curiosity.
Okay.
And absolutely vital is that purification of the intellect we talked about, buddhi shuddhi, that clarity, that quietness of mind, often developed through things like selfless action, nishkama karma, and meditation, vipassana, is what makes the mind capable of actually receiving and reflecting this profound, subtle truth.
Got it. Now, the sources also bring up Ishvara God, usually, and the goal, liberation. How does the commentary connect these?
Right. The commentary notes that we can use inference, anumana, to point towards Ishvara, a kind of cosmic intelligence or director. You look at the incredible order in the universe, the law of cause and effect, how actions seem to lead to results, karma phala vipaga. It suggests a directing presence. Ishvara is seen as the witness, the sakshi, overseeing creation and distributing the fruits of action, often described as wielding the power of Maya.
Is Ishvara the same as the ultimate self, the Atman, then?
Ah, that's a subtle but really important distinction the commentary maintains. Ishvara is the cosmic witness and director, operating within the realm of causality and creation through Maya. But the ultimate self, Atman, is pure consciousness itself, the absolute witness, you could say, which is the very ground of Ishvara, Maya, and the whole universe, is prior to all that.
Okay.
And connecting to liberation or immortality, amritatvam, a really key emphasis in these sources is that this isn't just some reward you get after you die, like going to heaven. It's something realized right here, right now, while living, by knowing the self.
So actions help prepare, but the knowledge itself is the liberator.
Exactly. Actions, karma, are indispensable for purification, for preparing the mind, antakarana shuddhi.
Mm.
But liberation itself comes through the knowledge gained via the unique means, the scriptural teaching understood through a prepared, purified intellect.
Wow. Okay, let's just take a breath and try to recap this incredible journey through Swami Viditatmananda's commentary on these Kenopanishad sections. We started with that basic human quest for happiness, seeing how the commentary contrasts looking outside versus the deep inquiry, the jignasa, within.
Right.
Then we tackled why this self, this Atman, isn't knowable like an ordinary object because it's the very consciousness that knows. We touched on its nature, self-luminous, eternal, changeless reality,
Vayam prakasha, yes.
and how ignorance, ajnana, leads us to superimpose our limited changing identities onto that changeless core, the adhyaropa.
The mistaken identity.
And finally, the path to knowing this unknowable. Not by grasping, but through pratibodha viditam, the reflection in a purified mind, guided by scripture, shruti, and a teacher, leading to liberation, amritatvam, not in the afterlife, but right here and now.
Yes, that core theme runs through it all, understanding the unique nature of the knower versus the known, and how the self is revealed not as an object, but as our fundamental nature, dissolving that very distinction.
It really does turn our whole perspective inside out, doesn't it? So thinking about all this, drawing from the commentary, maybe here's a thought for you, the listener, to reflect on. If your deepest essence, your true nature, really is this eternal, changeless, self-shining consciousness, the very ground of everything,
Right.
how does that square with the person you usually take yourself to be? You know, the one with a name, a body, a history, worries, joys. What might that imply about where real, lasting strength and freedom are actually found?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's where the inquiry really begins to bite.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into these powerful teachings from the Kenopanishad, illuminated by Swami Viditatmananda's commentary based on the sources we had. It feels like we've only just begun to explore these ideas, and hopefully we can continue as more material becomes available. Definitely something to keep thinking about.